insanity. No, really, I think we were prompted because we've just seen so much change in the harbour over, me about 40 years, and Hamish, I won't say how long.
Oh, it's about 60 odd years, 65 years. Yeah.
So, you know, just seeing all that change in the harbour and the loss of the kelp forests, particularly because the kelp forests are home. You don't have an ecosystem if you don't have the kelp forest. So, you know, that was the big thing. It's like we need to do something about that. I reckon it was doing the Hawaii moana monitoring, wasn't it? The ecological survey stuff, the community-based surveying. And, you know, we were doing a lot of different areas, but we had a few areas in the harbour. And, you know, we could see that the harbour really was the place that was suffering perhaps the most. And then I think, you know, the idea of doing something that was sort of Hokainga-centred, but included the community, I think, so that it all just came together and it's like, okay, well, something has to be done. I guess it's going to be us.
And the Hawaii moana was a good way of monitoring it all, and gave us a look at different places up the coast as well as in the harbour. And because I'd seen the harbour when it was fairly good when I was a kid, I noticed a lot of difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do become accustomed. You know, we become accustomed to something and it becomes our normal. But the thing is that one of the big points, I think, is that with the Hawaii moana monitoring, we're really focused on connecting to the mauri of a place. And I think that's really was something for me, is like you cannot hide from that. You can't pretend that everything's okay when you can feel that the mauri of a place is really, really damaged or in a really bad way. So, you know, there's no way to sort of skip over that. It's just right in your face, you know, if you take the time to connect to it. Yeah. So we were really lucky to get this. This container, this big 40-foot refrigerated trailer, was sitting in a paddock, and it had been sitting in a paddock for a few years, and it got offered to us at a pretty good price, which we didn't have the money for, but we managed to scrape something together. And it's turned out to be really perfect because it's given us the space to expand the project. So, you know, we're in the beginning phases of it at the moment, but we've got all the space to really, you know, crank it up. Yeah. So it's been a labour of love. Like everything in this trust is volunteer labour. We have been very fortunate in getting really great support from the local community. We've had some amazing donations from community members, and we've managed to get a little bit of funding from Foundation North just recently, which has been fantastic. So we've used the donations that we had to prepare the lab. Hamish and his son Manu built the tables, and we've of course been getting a huge amount of support from the Massey University researchers that we've partnered with to actually develop the green gravel process, which we can run through. So yeah, you know, this is sort of work in progress after a year, and we're about to take a big leap because thanks to Foundation North, we've got some money to actually get the rest of the equipment. And, yeah. Do you want to start at this table? Yeah. So the big part about this project is we want it to be something that other communities, if they wanted to, they can get on and do it for themselves as well. So we're partnering with the university. So they've got their labs that are really well kitted out and everything, and which is great. But we need to be able to do stuff, you know, at a pretty grassroots level. So this is our very technical sterilisation unit. So instead of having an autoclave that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, we just have a gas ring. We take the raw water from the harbour, we just collect it in 20-litre containers. We filter it. I just want to show you the very high-tech filters. So a couple of 1 micron filter socks out of a filtration machine, and we actually just hand filter the water through there. So that gets rid of all of the particulate matter down to 1 micron, which is pretty fine. And then we sterilise it by, once it's filtered, we put it into here, and we sterilise it on the gas ring. We have to be really super careful not to boil it, because otherwise we can destroy all the nutrients in the water. But we're also, at the moment, we're experimenting with not sterilising the water, because this is quite tricky, even keeping it simple. And so now we're looking at, we've got an experiment going right at the moment to see if we can do it without actually having to sterilise the water, just have it filtered. So that's the first stage. We have the water up this way.
This is the next table we're going to bring in the tanks, this one here.
Yeah. So this is what growing kelp looks like. So these tanks have been going for a week now, and if you have a look inside the tanks, you can just see a whole lot of little pebbles. So this is a process known as green gravel, and it was started in some universities in Norway and then down in Australia, and now it's in a few other universities around the world. And the idea basically is that you're providing a very, very nice little nursery for the reproductive tissue from the kelp to release the zoospores into a confined area where they can fertilise and then settle down onto the pebbles. Once they settle onto the pebbles, then sunlight and nice, good, nutrient-rich, clean water does the rest. So the process from this point to us having baby kelps, which we call kelplings, about this size, ready to plant out into the harbour, it's around about 3 months. The really great thing about this process is that it is really straightforward. Once you hone down the techniques, it's pretty straightforward. But what we're able to do is we're able to take a small amount of that reproductive tissue and concentrate it into a small area, and so the survival rate or the settlement rate is off the chart compared to what it would be out in the ocean. But of course in the ocean you've got thousands, hopefully, of Eclonia kelp plants releasing tissue at different times, and so your recruitment doesn't have to be super high. But when you're trying to regenerate a kelp forest, whether doing it by just removing the behaviours, the human behaviours that have caused the problem, the loss of the kelp, or whether you're trying to do this, the important part of it is that the kelp is doing the job. Right? We're not growing kelp. we're just participating in that process and giving the kelp an ideal start, and then they just do the rest.
We've got fresh water in this tank, refrigerated fresh water, which is refrigerating the salt water here. There's a salt water in this tank. There's a fresh water which is going through that refrigeration unit, and then it goes along through another filter, and it comes up along this board here, along this pipeline, and back into here, and then continues the cycle. So we've got a little bit of analyte in here this time, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
To try and keep down the growth inside the pipes.
And we've got to try and keep the water temperature about 17 degrees, which is just the ideal kind of springtime water temperature out in the harbour, and that seems to be about the ideal temperature for kelp growth. And obviously we regulate the amount of light. So at the moment these guys are new, and so we've got the lights up quite high because we don't want to overpower them. Once in another week or so, we'll just bring these lights further down so there's actually more sunlight getting onto the kelp. So because by that stage their photosynthetic cells will be starting to kick into action, and they'll actually be photosynthesizing. And by that stage we'll be, with our experiment, the filtered water only, the filtered and sterilised water. We want to see whether the nutrients that are in this water have been affected by being sterilised. So if they have, we're going to see more growth, faster growth in this tank than we will in this tank. The reason that you sterilise it, generally speaking, is that there are all sorts of other microorganisms in the water that possibly won't get filtered out through the filter socks. And if they happen to be other algae, they might grow a lot faster than the Aclonia kelp, and then they would just grow over the rocks, and there's no chance for the Aclonia to actually grow. We're really super lucky here because we've got access to coastal water, so it's pretty clean mostly, and you know, if this experiment works, then basically that could be the same for a lot of other communities up and down the coast. We wouldn't have to worry about the sterilising. Just get in there and give them a good filter. In 20 years, we will have been sat there for 10 years celebrating, because this is the wonderful thing about the ocean, is that it's so resilient, and because all of the nutrients are everywhere, it's not like the atmosphere, as you know, where you've got to rely on the soil. The water is the soil. So things can recover really, really quickly. So our goal is actually that we've got healthy kelp forests in the harbour, and the harbour returning into a vibrant, resilient system with really strong mauri by about 2030. So, you know, and in sort of another 6 to 10 years is our goal. We're going to see a really healthy harbour.